You're listening to Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
And we are back for part 2 of the Zion, Illinois story.
Yes.
So give us a quick synopsis of what we covered up to this point, Gavin.
Yes, so part 1, you should have listened to it, and maybe you should have listened to it again, just to catch yourself up. But to save you that time, we have a city that's just south of Kenosha, Zion, Illinois, and it's founded by a church leader. He's got thousands of acres of land, and he builds a city on it. And he starts out being just a really, really religious guy who's got strict rules about what you can and can't do. Then he gets a little silly, and he claims he's the reincarnation of a biblical prophet. And it also turns out, which, you know, today, when you hear it, doesn't sound like a surprise to me, pocketing all the money. like that's...
Well put.
I hate to say it, but you hear that so often, these people who have these giant successful churches, and a lot of times these guys are some questionable guys who run it. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but it happens. Well, he gets forced out, he dies, a new guy comes in who we're going to call Wilbur, and he straightens things up financially. But then he goes from sort of being the hero to he himself then having these strong running things himself kind of thing. And maybe even more so than his predecessor, because the previous guy really liked to travel around and get new members. Wilbur doesn't seem to leave the city a whole lot. I think he really loves the day-to-day, making sure things are running his way.
And he probably just likes maintaining the hold that the church has on this city.
Yes.
Basically.
So he's meaner. He's a lot more insulting to people who he doesn't agree with.
He seems like he's more into the idea of the religion itself, and the other guy was more into the idea of growing the religion, because he knew if he grew the religion, it would get him more money. Yeah. You know, it's like a very different approach.
Yeah, and I don't know if the first guy was a fraud or if he was real for a while and then at some point he turned. I don't know. Like, I can't see inside his mind. But definitely at some point, he was not being real anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he really thought he was the reincarnation of Elijah, but I think we can safely say he probably wasn't.
He wasn't, and he had built 3 $75,000 houses off of the church's money, and keep in mind that this is in the early 1900s, which, I mean, what is that? Maybe 300, 400,000 a piece?
I don't know. I didn't do the math, but it's a lot.
It's a huge amount of money, and that's not normal for somebody that's running a church to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we're gonna pick up. Wilbur's running things. This church city Zion started in 1901. We're now flash forward ahead to 1922. Wilbur has got everything back. The city is financially okay. They're not bankrupt. They're not in debt. Everything is good. And he says, how can I celebrate now that we're all back and good?
Okay.
He purchases a radio station.
All right.
He buys WCBD, and it is the voice of Zion, where he can go on the air regularly and give speeches and sermons about how evil evolution and astronomy are. And he puts out an offer. He says, I will give $5,000 to anyone that can prove to me that the earth is round.
Okay.
So for this second half of this story, we're going to go even deeper into the flat earth.
So he's really, really obsessed with this whole round
He
and flat
is
earth
all
thing.
in.
That's gotta lead me to believe that was the big thing of his time was that they came out and said no, the earth is round, and he's like no.
Yeah, he is all in. Now, and he's also still going on the whole idea that because the earth is flat, heaven is up in the sky and hell is in the ground. He says, and I quote, and I'm going to quote this exactly how he says it here.
Which is going to be very colorful, I'm going to guess.
Hell is a lake of fire under the earth, but the devil himself never goes near the place. Satan hovers over the earth, directing suicides, murders, wars, and crime, and he sends his squads of evil spirits here and there to grab some damn soul as soon as it leaves the mortal body. Heaven used to be under the earth too, next door to hell, but when Jesus died and descended into hell, he decided to take heaven away, so he picked up the good spirits and formed heaven above. Yeah.
So now does this come from the Bible, or is he just making this up pretty much?
So depending on, there's different versions of it depending on which branch of Christianity you believe in. But there is a thing called the harrowing of hell.
Okay.
And the harrowing of hell is like Jesus dies and he does go to hell, and then he rises to heaven.
Okay, I think I've heard this. Yeah.
Some versions he just goes to heaven, but there's others that he goes to hell first, and he kind of like talks to all the people who are down there who couldn't go to heaven previously because you couldn't go to heaven until Jesus died for your sins. Jesus is like, I'm dead now. Let's go. Let's get out of here. There is that version. I don't know anything about the heaven being under the ground next door to hell part. That I don't think is in there, but I maybe he's getting it from somewhere. I don't know, but this isn't completely off.
Yeah, I mean
mark.
that's my big thing is that is he just making shit up, or is there some basis for this?
I don't know the idea of the heaven being under the ground thing, but I don't know. Whatever. That's his thing. So he got a lot of notoriety for preaching about the flat earth, and especially once he put out the money challenge. And this church was already getting picked up all around the world in the newspapers. Even the Kaukauna newspapers, Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem, even the Kaukauna newspapers, like there were dozens of articles from when Dowie was in charge and then later when Wilbur was in charge.
Really?
In the Kaukauna newspaper, just giving updates on what they were doing because they thought they were so nuts.
So, I mean, this must be an unusual thing.
Yeah.
Then because we're what, 4 hours away, 3 hours away from there?
Yeah.
And they're reporting it.
Yeah. So it's getting picked up. There's getting articles in national magazines, and pretty much everybody thinks Wilbur is nuts. They reprinted a book called 100 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Globe, that another flat earth person wrote. They would speak out against astronomy on the radio. But other than occasional short articles in the Leaves of Healing magazine, they didn't really have a lot of long-form deep dives into this.
Mm-hmm.
But then comes the May 10th, 1930 issue of Leaves of Healing magazine, which, not even counting the images that are printed in it, it runs to 75,000 words.
Okay.
Which is about like a medium-sized book.
I was going to say that sounds pretty enormous.
Yeah. So the history press books that I've done, those run like 80 to 100,000 words. So this is slightly shorter than that, but it's still 75,000 words is not.
It's not a magazine, it's a book at that point.
Yeah, it's thick. The cover shows Wilbur holding a book and pointing at a flat earth map. The caption says that he is critically examining the proof that the earth is flat. The map in case people don't know what the flat Earth map looks like, I will explain to you what the image looks like. It is round, not round like a globe, but round like a circle.
Mm-hmm.
The North Pole is in the center of the circle.
Okay.
And where the South Pole would be is the whole outside rim of the circle.
Okay.
And it's a giant wall of ice. What they're saying is that north isn't the top, north is the middle, and south is out to the edge. And you can't go past the South Pole because it's a giant ice wall.
Okay.
That's the argument.
All right.
So, yeah. The one weakness that they admitted to is because of the way that this like projects the continents on there. Australia is suspiciously long, and how many miles it would be on the map doesn't match up with how many miles the train in Australia runs. So they're like, yeah, the things that are like in the south do kind of get stretched a bit. So they're like, it might need some modifications, but they're like, this is basically it.
Mm-hmm. And this magazine is online, so I can go and look at this.
Oh, you totally can.
I'm going to check this out.
You totally can. And yeah, they're like, the thing is that they want to go against astronomy because their belief is that astronomy is the number one thing that's steering people away from the Bible. That's their belief. Now, other people would disagree with them, and other people would say, there's another way to like make this work. You can just say, not everything in the Bible is word for word, like literal. like they point out like, hey, did you notice that like in the Bible it says the four corners of the earth, and like everyone else is like, that's not literal. Like that just means like all directions. And they're like, no, and like has to be corners on this map of where the earth ends. And so that's the difference, is they're saying like, if you start from the belief that everything in the Bible is literally as written true, you have to reject astronomy. And the other side is, you can believe in astronomy and the Bible. Like, just don't read it like that. Which is how most people today would probably accept that. Mm-hmm. Because not everything is like, sometimes people write poetically, you know, like it's.
And keep in mind that this book is written how many hundreds of years ago. The way they probably talked back then, some of the things they would have said back then that was perfectly normal is probably really weird to us today, right?
Yeah,
and they're going to probably throw some slang into it, and the slang of their time is not our slang. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to get into religious debates on a podcast, but it's a weird, if you want to debate like the truth of the Bible or not, like that's one thing. Like that's okay. That's totally fair. But if you're going to die on the hill of it being like literally there has to be ends of the earth, like you are missing the point, man. Mm-hmm. You are missing the point. But that's where he's coming from. He goes, either one, the Bible is literally true, or the astronomers are right. And he's like, they both can't be true. You know, both can't be true. So he's like, I'm going to err on the side of the Bible. Mm-hmm. Totally reasonable.
Actually, yeah.
Totally reasonable, except his interpretation is a little weird. He attacked the astronomers saying that the sun was 93 million miles away from the earth. He goes, that doesn't make any sense. And he goes, let me tell you. Copernicus said it was 3 million miles away. Kepler said it was 13 million. Newton said 28 million. Later, they got up to 93 million, and some even say 104 million. He goes, well, guess what? Between the first and the last one, there's a difference of 103 million miles. He's like, how can I trust you when you have two different measurements that are over 100 million miles in difference? Fair point.
No, very fair point.
Yeah. Yeah, he says that the Bible talks about there being a firmament in the sky, and he takes firmament to be literally like a firm shell in the sky over like a dome. So he goes, can't be outer space because there's a dome and that's where all the stars are. He says, therefore, because there's the dome, the sun, the moon, and the stars must be small enough to fit inside the dome. He says, if you look at Genesis, God set them in the firmament to give light upon the earth. So they're in the dome. They can't be farther out than the dome. Mm-hmm. He says, if you look at Revelation, it says, the stars of heaven fell onto the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken by a mighty wind. He goes, if the stars can fall upon the earth, they can't be bigger than the earth. They have to be small enough that they could fall onto the earth. I mean, yes, true. Again, assuming that everything in Revelation is literal, which that's a tall order if you've read Revelation, because there's like beasts with multiple heads and this.
Seas turning to blood. And...
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's cool. He says, if you look at Psalm 93, it says, the world is established that it cannot be moved. If it can't be moved, well, clearly it's not circling the earth. Talks about the corners or ends of the earth.
You can definitely see, though, how a person back in this era would definitely kind of see his point, I think. I think you can look at what he's saying and say, he's not, like, babbling off a bunch of nonsense.
No.
He's
not. But this is the thing is, like, even his own church members, this is kind of the thing that starts turning them against him. Not all the political, like, running the city and all the strict laws. Like, they may not like that either, but it's the flat earth stuff that really gets them upset because they realize that this is making them look like idiots to the rest of the country, and they don't like being embarrassed about it. And like, there's strong religious believers in town. Like, they wouldn't live in Zion if they weren't, but they're like, you're taking this way too far, man. Like,
so now when you were talking about in the last episode, you mentioned how Kakana had multiple articles written in their newspaper about this group. Is that when this whole flat earth thing really comes into play? Is that what they're writing about? Like,
no.
Or this is just the development of the city and stuff that they were reporting to?
Yeah, there's articles in the Kakana Sun and Kakana Times before, like, Wilbur even takes over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, these guys had really good PR. Yeah, and they would get published all over the place,
or it was just that what they were doing was so different.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what drove it.
Yeah, people are starting to be like, I don't know about this, man, because although he's saying you got to pick astronomy or the Bible, like, they're also like, well, I don't have to be an astronomer to look at a telescope and look at the moon. Like, I can see the moon, man. Like, it's not like stuck up there on the ceiling. So they've reached that point, at least now, where, like, the average person can see, like, what's up in the sky with more than just looking up at the sky. In 1931, we reached the point where planes could fly around the world. And he said, well, they're not flying around the world. They might be, like, flying in a circle around the North Pole, but they're not going around the world. That would be not possible. And he goes, here are the most common things that people try to get the $5,000 from. They go back and they use these arguments from Aristotle, all the way from ancient Greece. And he goes, these are the three things that Aristotle used to prove that the earth was round.
Okay.
And he goes, and I will show you why they're wrong.
Okay.
Aristotle says, 1, you can see that the earth is round because when we watch a ship sailing away, as it reaches the horizon, it sinks over the horizon and it goes down and the mast goes down and everything goes down. And that happens because it's going around a curve.
Yeah.
And when it comes back, it goes back up the other way. He goes, if it were flat, it would just get smaller. It wouldn't sink down like that.
Very sound thinking.
Yes. But in Zion, that is just an optical illusion. And he says, think of it like this. Stand on a train track and look at the train track. Under your feet, the two sides of the train track are about 3 feet apart. On the horizon, they are touching. But we know they're not actually touching. This is an illusion.
Okay.
So he's like, the way the ship looks is just the same thing. It's not right, but it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean,
Aristotle says, we know that the Earth is round because when there's a lunar eclipse, we see a round shape on the moon. So the sun is projecting the shadow of the Earth onto the moon, and it is round. In Zion, there is no proof that the curving shadow during an eclipse is the shadow of the Earth. Furthermore, pretty sure we've seen several eclipses where both the sun and the moon were visible in the sky at the same time. So we don't think that the moon is getting a shadow from the Earth. I don't know what that's referencing. I don't know how you could have an eclipse with the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time. I mean, a solar eclipse, yeah. Mm-hmm. That, but not a lunar eclipse. I don't know how that would be possible. He might just be pulling stuff out there. Third, Aristotle says, we know that some stars can only be seen in the northern hemisphere, like the Big Dipper, and some can only be seen in the southern hemisphere, like the Southern Cross. If the Earth was flat, we could see all the stars at any point on Earth. In Zion, that is not how this works. He says, the reason this is because the dome is at such a height, it is so low that the curvature of it, you cannot see everything from all spots because of how low and curved it is. So it's nothing to do with the roundness of the Earth. It's if the dome is curved, you'd have to get over the mountains to see the other side of the sky. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, fair, I guess. So that's what he's going. So yeah, there's no South Pole. He says the ice wall is a circle of 60,000 miles. One man claimed that he sailed around Antarctica, and it took him 14,000 miles to do it. In Zion, they said this is not possible. He said maybe he went around an island or something, but if he went around Antarctica, he would have had to go 60,000 miles, not 14,000 miles, so he didn't do it. I don't know if the guy went around Antarctica, but I'm going to assume he did. I don't know. They say that bird flew over the South Pole, but there is no South Pole. East, west, and south are not absolute directions. They are only relative directions with a reference to north. East and west are points at right angles to the north. He goes, here, I will prove it. And here's his argument. And it's not even bad. He says, I know that the sun is not more than 30 miles in diameter and not more than 3,000 miles above the earth. He goes, here's how we can figure this out. He goes, on March 21st, the sun is directly overhead at the equator, and it appears 45 degrees above the horizon at 45 degrees north or south latitude. As the angle of the sun above the earth at the equator is 90 degrees, while it is 45 degrees at 45 degrees north or south latitude, it follows that the angle at the sun between the vertical from the horizon and the line from the observers at 45 degrees north or south must also be 45 degrees. I will translate that.
I was going to say, because you lost me.
Okay. So this is the thing. So if you're standing on the equator and the sun is directly overhead, mm-hmm. It's at a 90 degree angle.
Okay.
Directly up, and with the earth flat and the sun directly up, it's a 90-degree right angle. If you go 45 degrees north to 45 degrees south, conveniently for us, Wisconsin's about 45 degrees north, so we know what the sun looks like. The sun is at 45 degrees in the sky from where we're standing.
Okay.
And which is how the latitudes get, that's what degrees mean, literally, so that's why we're at 45 degrees north. But whatever, he says, if you use geometry, you can figure out what the measurement of a triangle is. So if we know that from here to the equator is 3,000 miles, and from the equator to the 45 degrees south is 3,000 miles, and those two together are 90 degrees, it forms an equilateral triangle, and therefore the direction up to the sun can't be more than that 3,000 miles. It's complicated to explain in words over a podcast, but like, it is true that in geometry, that's how you measure the sides of a triangle. So his argument is, if we know the distance from one planet Earth to another is 3,000 miles, we can figure out that it's 3,000 miles up to the sun. Really good reasoning.
Okay.
That's totally fair.
But how is that not true then? Do you know?
How is it not true?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like, how can we disprove this?
It is true. The sun's only 30 miles across. No, it is true. The sun's not 93 million miles away. Are you crazy? No, apparently it gets technical, but apparently, like, it only works if the Earth is flat. Because once the Earth is curved, the entire measurements are thrown off.
Thrown out of whack.
Yeah. Because then you're not measuring it from the exact, like, the 3,000 miles doesn't work out around a curve and it throws it off. Plus, you have to kind of presuppose the size of the sun to know how far it is. So his numbers work, but his numbers have to start from presupposing certain things about what he's measuring. So if we presuppose a round Earth, that's how they come up with, like, the 93 million. That's how they knew that before they ever had, like, the fancy scientific, going into space stuff. They knew that before that because they could do the geometry. But that was the geometry presupposing the Earth was round.
Okay.
So they're both correct. It's just whether the Earth is round or flat that makes the math right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was very complicated. Everyone at home was like, what the hell? But
I don't know, because I got it.
Okay.
So,
I just don't like math. But
you like it a lot better than I do, so.
But I'm just saying, like, his reasoning is strong. Like, he's nuts in the sense that we know he's not right, but his reasoning is strong.
And he's probably, put him back in his time, he's probably not nuts, because probably the knowledge of knowing that was a lot more questionable back then than it is today.
I suppose.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so people would try to claim this $5,000 prize, and one person would say, hey, well, here we go. Like, the moon is round, the planets are round, therefore, the Earth must be round. And Wilbur says, well, that's crappy logic, because let's see. Here's a cow. This cow has horns. Therefore, all cows must have horns, but all cows don't have horns. He goes, you could find as many planets as you want that are round. It doesn't mean that ours is also round. Just true. Just true. Mm-hmm. He says that the Earth can't be round because then airplanes wouldn't work. If airplanes were traveling 300 miles an hour, then each hour, if the Earth was round, they would have to fall 60,000 feet in order to maintain their altitude instead of just flying off into space. The response to that is, well, they just stay curved the whole time. It's not that they just fly straight and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I gotta get back down to the earth again. So, but he is right that if they just went straight instead of following the curve, they would suddenly be way out in space. That's true. But he's, it's very, very strange that that's his reasoning there. He was interviewed in 1932, and he said that the sun was only 3,000 miles away and 30 to 32 miles in diameter. When he was asked why the sun was so near, he said, God made the sun to light the earth. And if God made the sun to light the earth, it makes sense that he would place it in a place that was appropriate for it to do that job. Now, what would happen if I built a house here in Zion and I wanted to light the house? Would I put the light in my house, or would I put the light in Kenosha? I would put the light in my house. So if the sun is designed to light the earth, why would I put it so far away?
I mean, I gotta say that, like, there's a certain amount of logic to that, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with some of the stuff he's saying.
Yeah. The people really turned on him by 1934. And in 1934, the elections start going against him. They voted for the wrong school board president. And so he had a sermon the following Sunday, and he let everybody know they voted for the wrong school board president, and he was not afraid to back up God with his own 2 guns. He said he had enough guards to shoot down 100 men within a few seconds if the city continued to vote for swine eaters, cigarette smokers, and booze swillers.
Wow.
So
now he's threatening the people.
Yeah, he's reached the point where, like, if you stop voting correctly, I'm just gonna start shooting. They didn't like that, and the following year, they rose up and they kicked him out. They said, "You're not in charge anymore. You're done."
So now, was he some sort of political figure at this point in time? Or was he just the church guy and had everybody just listen to what he said?
He was the head of the church, but it's this weird thing where the church owns the city, it owns the schools, it owns all this.
But it sounds like there's real, like, elections and everything. So
they
just managed to drag it out long enough where he could get his cronies into government to keep it all under his control, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
So they overthrew him, and immediately they're like, "Yeah, we're not doing this flat earth thing anymore. You're done." Next elections come around in 1937. He's like, "Okay, I'm coming back, guys. I'm coming back." He tried everything he could to get his guys elected and put back in power, but no, they had turned on him. He wasn't getting back in, and as he had his chauffeur on election day drive him past one of his fancy churches, he sees, to his horror, black smoke in 5 different and widely separated places billowing out of the church. And he later claimed that he heard 15 explosions. The fire was pretty bad. It even spread next door and burned down his radio station. And the fire department couldn't do too much. They tried, but they couldn't do too much about it.
Did he still have his fig plant?
Yes. Yes. Wilbur estimated the loss at $600,000 and said that he only had $23,000 in insurance. So that wasn't going to help. He claimed that it was arson, and it was set by people who really hated the fact that he was putting on an Easter play. He says people hate
It's got to be the Easter play, right?
Yeah. He goes, "This Easter play aroused terrific opposition among an element of this community, which I have fought for 30 years. People hate Easter." The reverend in town, who was not a member of the church, said, "Well, yeah, we don't always like him, but we didn't set that fire." He goes, the other guy says, in my opinion, the fire was a judgment of God against his tabernacle. A young kid, well, I guess not young kid, he's 19. A kid named who was 19 confessed setting the fire with kerosene to get even with Wilbur for failing to provide funds to help bury his foster mother. Wilbur said, that's poppycock. Literally poppycock is the word he uses. He goes, I helped bury your foster mother. But the kid was arrested for arson anyway and faced a possible 10 years in prison. I don't know what he got, but place was in trouble. Wilbur, now without a radio station, with not much of a church left until they rebuilt it, because they did rebuild out of that. No political aims, really. He starts living in Florida, and he spends most of his time in Florida. He only comes back to Zion every so often. For the last almost 20 years, he had lived on a diet of only buttermilk and Brazil nuts, which he had told people was the magic formula that would get him to reach the age of 100. But this diet instead made him severely diabetic and made his eyesight fail. And when he returned to Zion in 1942, he couldn't go back to Florida because he was too sick to even leave his home in Zion at that point. He died in October 1942 at age 72. Not terrible, but not 100. Mm-hmm. And his successor at the church, a man named Michael Minturn, conducted the funeral. The person who runs like the church, because they also run the city, their title is General Overseer. I love that title. It sounds like so serious. I'm the General Overseer of Zion.
So now, is this church still in? You said the building's there.
The church is still there.
So the church does still actually exist.
The church still does actually exist. But as far as I can tell, after Dowie and after Wilbur, Zoliva, after they're gone, all the really strange things are kind of taken out of it, and Zion becomes more and more like a regular city. They tend to be closer to like a Pentecostal church. I'm not super familiar with what the difference is in all the different denominations, but they're closer to a Pentecostal church than whatever they were under this weird system. Mm-hmm. So they did move away from that. 5 years after Wilbur died, the first movie theater came to town.
Ooh.
The movie theater was allowed to come in and open. The church did continue on under the new leadership, and then the leadership, that would pass and get new leadership, and it does still exist today.
And obviously the church does not have any hold really over the city at this point.
I don't think so. Definitely not in that same way. It's interesting. Like, the city is still laid out the original way. Like, you can still see it because like the street names still have the center is the church.
Okay.
And the church, everything kind of circles out from the church. And the street names are all named after like prophets from the Bible. So it's still got that. And you can see, like, even though it's not what it was, it's still very much a lot of that has remained. Mm-hmm. So that you can tell the influence there. But yeah, things kind of slowly went up. 1962, the church still owned a candy factory, but they sold off the candy factory.
So until 1962, huh?
And in 1973, they still had the Fig Bar Company, and they ended up getting in a lawsuit with Nabisco, claiming that Nabisco was selling its fig bars at an undercutting price, creating a monopoly. Zion claimed that they lost $1.5 million in sales, and they wanted $4.5 million in damages from Nabisco because of Nabisco pushing them out of the fig bar market. I don't know how that case turned out. But even as late as the 70s, the church was still actively running the Fig Bar Company. In the 1980s, the city still had their ban on drinking. Mm-hmm. Alcohol was still forbidden. But there was a weird situation that happened where the surrounding town, like the non-city parts surrounding the city, drinking was okay. Because in the county, it was okay to drink.
Right.
But the city would slowly, like, annex property, which is what cities do. They start bringing other pieces of property into the city. And they brought 2 pieces of property in that were on Sheridan Road. And Sheridan Road, for people not familiar, because I know this is the Fox Cities podcast.
We're talking Illinois right now.
And we're talking Illinois. Sheridan Road is like this road that kind of runs parallel with Lake Michigan. It goes from Zion up through Kenosha and Racine. Like it's a very, very long road. And
is this when you get down to Chicago, you turn and you would continue on 41? Is that the road you're talking about?
I think it's...
And it goes like through Waukegan.
I don't think it is the same as 41. I could be wrong.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I think it's even farther. I think it's closer to the lake than that even.
Okay.
But there were 2 businesses, and in the 80s, they were called the Pit Stop and the New Horizon. I don't know what they are today. And they served alcohol at both of them. And then they got annexed into the city. And the law was such that they couldn't make them stop selling alcohol. Like that's not fair. So instead, the pieces of property that these 2 businesses were on were never annexed into the city. They were still part of the surrounding township.
So now the whole city's built around these 2 buildings?
The whole city is built around them. And they are just these little islands.
And they're still considered the town of whatever.
Yeah, the town of Benton.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And like it creates this weird situation because if they have a problem, bar fight or something, and they call the police, the Zion police will show up, but they have no actual authority there. So they'll just like keep watch until the sheriff shows up. Today, I don't know. I don't know what the situation is. But in the 80s, this is how things were still run. Was the Zion police could only just like stand there until the sheriff showed up because there was no jurisdiction for the city police to be there.
Mm-hmm. This kind of reminds me of are you familiar with Hoffman Estates in Illinois?
I've heard it. I don't know exactly the situation. What's up with Hoffman Estates?
So Hoffman Estates, something with the city, they decided they never really wanted to grow as a city. So they've always just been this small little city. And not to say that it's a pretty big city, but they just chose not to continue to grow. But the city next to it, Schaumburg, just kept growing. And now we're to the point where Schaumburg, like Hoffman Estates, is in the middle of the city of Schaumburg. Because Schaumburg has annexed all of the territory around Hoffman Estates to the point where it's the city's within the city, which is just funny.
Nice. I got 2 things, but my last real main thing here is in October 2022. So pretty current.
Yeah, very current.
October 2022. They opened a mosque in Zion. And the mosque was a branch of Islam that was the branch that was part of the guy who challenged Dowie to the prayer battle.
Okay.
And the guy who runs this church is the great-grandson of the guy who challenged Dowie to the prayer battle.
And that is just ironic, huh?
Yeah, so he comes in, he's at the grand opening of this mosque, and he gives a speech about it. And even on their website, they're really cocky. They're like, we beat you, Dowie. like, you're dead. Our church is still thriving in your city. It's really funny because I'm not even going to try to pronounce if you think my pronunciations are bad, you hear me try to pronounce Arabic. But even though, the original guy, I said he probably was not the Messiah. Hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. But his followers continued on, and they kept the church going. So, yeah, and they always, there's numerous things on their website referencing Zion and how proud they are that they kicked this guy's butt. They're like, yeah, you lost the prayer battle, dude.
That's
they take it seriously.
That is so
they
funny.
totally take credit for killing the guy with prayer.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, in 2022 they declared their final victory where they set up their religion in their former rival's home.
You just gotta imagine the conversation there. Like, did they literally say, "No, we're gonna go to Zion and build a church"? Because there's no reason to build a church in Zion.
Not really,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, for everybody, Zion is almost not a city. I don't think it's very big. I've only been there once, so I can't really.
Gosh, I don't remember. I had the numbers. It's not small, but it's like 20,000 people. It's not huge either.
It's not a place that you target to put a church in.
Yeah.
So this has to just be like, yeah, we're going to go stick it to them.
Yeah. So it's pretty funny.
That is crazy. And now I have to ask the golden question because, of course, this episode has nothing to do with the Fox Cities. How did you ever get turned on to this?
I'm so glad you asked because that is the final point on my sheet here.
Okay.
So I don't remember how this came up originally. It's definitely something that when I stumbled across it was of interest because, one, I love things with strange beliefs. That's always interesting to me, regardless of who it is. Two, it jumped out at me because it's Zion, Illinois. And although the listeners might not give a crap, I knew you would appreciate it.
And I definitely do.
So I was like, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm like, oh, maybe Eric doesn't know anything about it. I was like, maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't.
Why would I?
I don't know.
And I guess, all I remember is people telling me that it was a dry town. And I just thought that was so weird. But
there's totally a reason for it.
You got to figure there's a story behind that, right?
Yeah.
So
there's that. But here's the thing. At first, I developed the story because I was like, this is an interesting story. I'll find something to do with it. And I was hoping I could use it for Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem because I came across a reference where one of the proofs of the Earth being flat was that they took a photograph of a 12-mile stretch of shoreline at Lake Winnebago. And they had the camera 3 feet above the ground and were able to take this very, very wide shot. And I haven't even seen the image, but apparently this image is proof because it is so flat and so wide. And that's not possible because with the curvature of the Earth, it's supposed to be visible every 8 miles. That's their claim. I don't know the math on that, but that's their claim. So if you can see a 12-mile stretch of lake and it's not curved, well, then the Earth is flat.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't actually find the original reference to this. I found passing things saying oh yeah, this is one of the proofs that he used, but I couldn't actually find the photograph or a reference in the paper or his magazine to Lake Winnebago. So I was going to try to throw that in there to make this the most not at all Fox Cities, but I'm like, well, I can reference Lake Winnebago. But I did not succeed in actually getting it referenced to my satisfaction where I could actually back it up. So I don't doubt that this is true. I totally believe this happened. But if you ask me to show you the source, I can't. So it's putting it on Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem anyway. But I wasn't able to make that Fox Cities connection the way that I hoped that I could.
Either way, this was a fantastic story. It was just a fantastic story to begin with. And then the fact that it's Zion is just amplifies that so much more. So
yeah, there are 2 cult stories I would love to tell that are Fox Cities, and I'm not sure if I can tell them, and that's the problem. One, I won't say their name, but one is the cult in Shawano, and I shouldn't have to say their name. I think everybody who knows. I would be hesitant to cover that because they're still there.
Okay.
And the other one is in Tigerton, and in Tigerton they had the Posse Comitatus. I would be more willing to cover that, but even that, there's still people who I'm pretty confident are alive that were involved in that. So I would be a little hesitant to do it. But that's an interesting story. If people aren't familiar with Posse Comitatus, it was like this anti-government movement. And outside of Tigerton is also in Shawano County. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I don't know what's going on in Shawano County, but people in Tigerton, this group of anti-government people, set up their own community called Tigerton Falls. And it's totally not legal. I mean, they got in a lot of trouble for this. But to set up their own version of what they wanted, they set up Tigerton Falls, which leads to just constant fights with the local sheriff and things like that. It's a great story. It's super fascinating, and it gets into some weird stuff about people who have very not accurate beliefs about how taxes work and things like that. This is people who believe like the Constitution says I don't have to pay my taxes. Like, even if you're right, like that's not going to work. Like, I assure you,
today's day and age, that's not happening.
Yeah, like I don't care how good your argument is, like you're going to lose that fight. So they're very interesting, just for like how incredibly complicated their government beliefs are, which are, like they really get into these explanations, and they're very convincing because of how deeply and how thorough they are. But if you're not part of that, they sound nuts. So we might do that at some point. Like I said, I think they're fascinating.
It sounds like a very fascinating
The only reason I'd be hesitant is, like I say, I think there's a couple of them that are still around, and that wouldn't in itself, I mean, this is all public stuff. I wouldn't be saying anything that hasn't been printed, but I don't know if they want me to do that. And I get hesitant about that stuff because I don't want to accidentally misspeak.
Yeah, well, and I think that you say this is what the evidence has shown me, and if somebody wants to come onto this podcast I can clarify if I missed something here, feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, because there's no shortage of like court documents, so it's well documented. Like it's not just me telling stories; like it's really documented.
Yeah, and this, I mean, again, people will never hear this story unless we tell it.
Yeah, or otherwise, the former sheriff of Shawano County did write a book.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so few people. Maybe I should read that book because that sounds pretty interesting. But is that for the Tigerton one, or is that for the?
That's for the Tigerton one.
Oh, okay. Cool. Maybe we will get that book from Gavin and see if I can read it, because that sounds fascinating.
Sure. I got to remember what it's called. I would promote it right now. I would say what it's called, but I don't remember. But the former sheriff did write about his interactions with them.
So with that, are we having a Bigfoot episode now?
Do you want? Is that what you want next?
Yeah, we can do the Bigfoot and the murder.
Okay, cool.
So, well, I hope everybody enjoyed. I know that. I mean, hey, if you're out there and you're wondering why you should be interested in this story, just go pick up your favorite pick up a local H album, listen to it, realize it's their hometown, and that's why this story is so cool. Right?
Yeah, that's why. That's why the Midwest's greatest rock band came out of this. But no, I am officially retired right now. I do not write anymore, other than these podcast episodes. But if I was not retired, this is totally book material to me. I think I looked to see if there were books, and if they are, they're very out of print because I couldn't find any, which shocks the hell out of me, because this is so easy to like make something out of this.
So everybody's homework assignment before the next episode is MilwaukeeMafia@gmail.com. Send Gavin an email. All you have to do is say in this subject line, I want you to write a book about Zion.
Yeah, you could.
And if Gavin gets 10 emails by our next episode that says that, he'll write the book.
Wow.
He's coming out of retirement to write the book.
Wow. I mean, I guess you're in charge. I don't know. But seriously, I think this would be a real banger because and I know you love the word banger, but
I love the word banger.
but yeah, like for me to be able to get, and I know I did it with these 2 episodes, but to really get down in there with like the arguments this guy has, that's the part that I love. That's fascinating. It's just like how he's able to come up with his reasons, and like they're not bad. Like if you don't exist in his world, they sound dumb, but within his own internal logic, they're really good.
Sound, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said during the show, I think even to the people then, they were probably a lot more logical than they are now because there was probably a lot more controversy.
Yeah.
So, and I do want to follow up your banger with another. I bet you if you ever did write that book, there'd be a lot of gnarly shit in it.
In the Zion book?
Yeah, in the Zion book. I just wanted to use the word gnarly.
You want to use gnarly? Nobody says gnarly anymore.
Oh, yeah, dude, I hear people say gnarly.
Gnarly's back?
Gnarly's like that's like a gnarly thing to do, like a scary thing to do.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
They use it in all different contexts, but that's the one I most commonly hear it.
Okay.
So
learning the cool slang, I guess.
So we're back to being 20 years old again.
Yeah. Woo.
So now let's end this podcast because it's taken we're just way off.
Yeah, and it's probably like 3 hours long.
So with that, we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode, and we want to thank everybody for their continued support.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.